Welcome to the Lost Traveler podcast. I am your ever-loving host, Henry Cameron Allen. And today I have a new friend that we're bringing to the table as a co-host for the Lost Traveler podcast. In this episode, Kylie Mort is many things, and she is a best-selling author and has had multiple award-winning publications. She's an app developer. She is a life coach. The list is endless. I'm here looking at all the amazing things that you've done, yoga and philosophy and teaching and all that. And you're based in Melbourne, is that right? Australia?
Near Melbourne, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, thanks for being
Based
here.
in a little place called Warrambane, which is about 2.5 hours out of Melbourne. So you would say it's regional. Like as the sun went down today, there were kangaroos all over my front lawn and around the trees. So yeah, you definitely say it was a regional area.
Are you from there originally? Or you?
I'm originally from another little township, about an hour away from here. It's on top of the hills. It's up in the snow line. And yeah, I used to at one point in my early years, I ran the pub up there, the local pub, and met my husband when he came in. So, and then the rest is history. Moved here because
add that to your list of your long list of life experiences. You're not that old. You're not old at all.
An old soul, perhaps.
Old soul, exactly. This is a co-hosting situation. So this is an open conversation about universal life skills and sharing biographies and how did we get from point A to point B to become who we are, to be inspired, to be helpers in this world, to help uplift other people. I'm finding so many people in every culture around the world, every corner of the globe, who have that impulse and are putting that frequency out there. Where did that impulse begin in you? Growing up in a small town, did you have a broader sense of the world from your family, from your upbringing, your education?
I think for me, it's definitely a point of only very recently, in the last 5 years or so, looking back on life and thinking, oh, that's why that happened. And that's why I'm at this position. I mean, I think a lot of the drive and the, to have so many different, badges on my CV, I obviously worked very, very hard, and I was a driven person. I had massive goals and I hit all those things. But it wasn't until I think maybe 7 years ago that I inadvertently fell into a networking group of people that really made me look at my past closely. It was a past that has, childhood trauma and abuse and all of those kind of things that when that happens to you as a young person and you clamp that lid down on it and lock it and say, I am never thinking about that again, I'm never going there again, and I am stronger than this, at the time, that does give you strength and you can build up these walls and be an incredible, person who overcomes everything. But there comes a point where it's actually much healthier to open the door and explore it. And it's sort of, it might sound cliche, but so many people talk about the fact that you need to be able to fall apart and look at all the pieces before you rebuild back stronger again. And I think it was very much that kind of thing with me.
I can totally relate to that. I also grew up in a difficult home situation, early divorce. I was 6 years old. We were living abroad. I never had a solid foundation under me. And then, parents in different hemispheres of the world and ping pong.
Wow, that must have been tough.
But then also, being in a violent home and being in a situation where I did not always feel safe. In fact, I rarely felt safe. And I was rescued at age 13 from that environment and given as a gift the word integrity and told to go look it up. And I'm older than the hills. So back then we didn't have internet, we didn't have a Google or anything like that. So
I can remember those times.
yeah,
Big old dictionaries.
We had a big Oxford English Dictionary, the family I was staying with, and a big heavy brass music stand because it was so big and thick. And you would go and look things up. And I looked up integrity and the way I understood it. And to learn this at 14 really pivoted me in a very different direction than I might have gone. I might have gone down a very dark road. And you know what that feels like, when you see a light at the end of the tunnel. And that's what integrity gave me, a sense of myself as a whole person. Every aspect of my being is connected and integral. I'm an integrated being. I have my spiritual self, I have my physical self, I have my intellect, I have my curiosity and my sense of wonder, right? I have my inner child, but I also believe that we as children have an inner adult that guides us by our instinct towards survival. And we don't talk enough about that, I don't think. Do you have a perception of that? Did you have a perception of that or are able to identify that moment that pivoted you in the direction that you ended up going in?
Well, talking about, the critical moment where you could have gone down a very dark path. I think that's definitely a common theme with a lot of us. I was on that very dark path. I was there happening. And it was actually a teacher who, sort of tapped me on the shoulder and she said, Kylie, what are you doing? You're such a bright kid and, you get such good results, because I've always been a wordsmith. I've always loved literature. So, writing was sort of a lifeline that I clung to. And with this particular teacher, she was my literature teacher, and I was a very good student. And, no matter what crazy kind of things were happening after hours, when I was in the classroom looking at literature, that was my happy place. And, she said to me, you're going to end up in a very bad place if you don't sort yourself out. And it's not that I did actually sort myself out then, because there was a lot of drama after that as well. But I think that her belief in me helped me believe in me. So even though all of the darkness and all the, all of that kind of thing was happening, there was this glimmer of hope that I was worth redeeming. And I think that in one of the first published books that I did, called Empowered Women Empowering the World, I explore that kind of mindset that you don't think you're a worthy person, and you're creating all of these terrible things because it's your own choices. You're your own person. If you're doing these things, you're doing them yourself, even if you regret them. And I write in this particular book, I write about how, I just clung to this hope that there was something worth redeeming, and I could find that, and I could work on that. And in the end, it worked for me. But as I said, it was decades after that I actually did, pick apart why it happened the way it did. And it was through studying psychology that I started to look into, the adolescent mindset and what influences the adolescent mind. And that really helped me to detach myself from the situation and go, well, these were the childhood influences. These are the adolescent influences. I was a child. I can't take responsibility for, these particular points in time because I was manipulated, used, whatever, by the adults in my life. So studying psychology really helped me to unpack that and forgive myself for it. But then also studying the spiritual side of yoga yoga philosophy, and that kind of thing, and the ancient scriptures of that. You put the two together when you're looking at the fact that we're all souls put on this earth because we choose to be here, and we might be lost on this journey, but we're choosing to be lost and to re-find ourselves. So, and both the spiritual and the psychological, put that together, and it was really a wow moment for me. And that's why when I work with people now, it's always looking at such a holistic person. You know, you can't just work on academics, you can't just work on yoga therapy, you know, all of these different strings to my bow. I have to look at it holistically and look at this particular person and what are their needs, because it's all, as you say, it's all integrated. And if you're just working on one part,
right. Well, that's the spirit of yoga and its philosophy, right? Is that it's all integrated. And a lot of people, I think, who haven't studied yoga or haven't studied philosophies of the world, which, you know, my grandmother used to say, eat the fish and spit out the bones, right? Take what works for you, what resonates.
Yeah, that's a really great way to put it.
Right. And my mom says that too. And you know, really, that's how I managed to achieve what I've achieved in terms of my sense of self, gleaning a little bit from all of those delicious dishes, literature, through study, through interactions. I had the very great privilege of traveling globally when I was a child. My father was a diplomat, so I lived in many cultures, and he was not the kind of diplomat that put us in the compound with all the other diplomats' kids and all the other Americans. We went to the international schools, and so I had friends from Australia, I had friends from Angola, I had friends from Egypt, and we still are in touch to this day because we became like a global family. And that's precious. And you're absolutely right to know that you're worthy. I expect that this is a global phenomenon still, the level of misogyny in the world and the messages that girls get from a male-driven world without mentorship very often. My impression, I just saw recently the singer Madonna gave a speech. She won some, you know, Woman of the Year in Music award. I don't know if it was a recent award or a few years ago, but she was talking about being a woman in the music industry, in any industry, and the messages that you get as a child, the messages that you get as an adolescent. When you leave home and you're out in the world on your own, how you navigate as a woman in the world that tells you you're not to think, you're not to have an opinion, you're not to express your sexuality, you're not to express your intellect, or to explore any of those things, even. Very, very limited. Did you find that to be the case? She thanked all the people who told her she couldn't, because that gave her the fortitude to stick around, you know, and to become who she became.
I find it really interesting. Women are talking about the struggles that women go through in different career choices and generally, because and I know this is probably a very unpopular opinion, but I have never seen my gender as the barrier. I mean, it's really interesting. I've always been somebody who has struggled to overcome adversity, and that was financial adversity, you know, family adversity, all the rest of it. And I think maybe I was fighting so hard for everything that my gender was the least of my concerns. And it never really, it was never really a focus. It was, you know, I suffered a really bad horse riding accident when I was 10, and I was paralyzed from the waist down. And I had to learn to walk again. And having that at that age, 10 years old, grade 5, you're the freak. You're the, you come to school and you can't walk, and people use that as a weapon against you. So, I was overcoming so many different reasons to be bullied and ostracized and different. And then also too, I grew up in a family where children were used as tools against. You said that you're from a broken home too. I was from a broken home.
Yeah.
I was 7 years old when that went down.
Wow.
And my mum was so relentless in her war against my father, that she used us so effectively of tools we didn't even know were being used. And it wasn't until I was adult and then again studying psychology again, just looking back on it, just going, oh my goodness, how could any adult do that to children?
Yeah.
And and so I was going, there's so many barriers to success that I had that gender's never come up. And like, even now, I run a couple of companies, one of which is a diesel mechanic workshop. We work on the, road transport trucks.
Yeah.
And I've been running that for 20 years, and then decided this year, my husband, he's the expert, he's the diesel mechanic. And after the pandemic, and we didn't have staff and everything, and I said, you know what, Tom, I'm really keen on doing my apprenticeship. And he looked at me crazy. He's like, why would you want to do that? And I said, because I've been helping you do this for 20 years. Why don't I just get the ticket? Like, I'm one of these people who is just like, right, let's just go. Let's get the qualification. Yeah. And then so at the moment, I'm doing all of this, running a business and running a home and the kids and all the rest of it. I'm also doing my diesel mechanic apprenticeship. I'm also still ticking along on my psychology studies because I just love it so much that it's one of those degrees that you just drag on and on and on and keep adding to because you love doing it.
Well, so because we know more now than we ever have, and the science behind it, and the understanding of the human brain, which is really untapped, I think, still. It's fascinating to take the science of psychology and grow with it because it's constantly changing.
And certainly too with, if you're working in the coaching space, life coaching, or I do academic coaching for students as well and that kind of thing, you're constantly having a psychology degree ticking along in the background means I'm constantly looking at the new research and the new articles coming out and the new ways of thinking. And it just, having that on the side really boosts my ability to look at children and the adults I work with, to look at people holistically.
Shadow and Light, LLC was established by Dave Roberts and Reverend Patty Farino, co-authors of When the Psychology Professor Met the Minister. Their mission is to empower individuals to transcend life challenges by integrating spiritual practices with psychology to achieve peace. They are available for individualized spiritual counseling, virtual or in-person presentations and workshops to universities, organizations, and other interested groups, virtual or in-person book club meetings. For further information, go to psychologyprofessorandminister.com.
Yeah.
And to say, you might have come to me for math tuition, but let's dig a little deeper on this. Or, you might need help with your essay writing, but I've really got this great, a few yoga moves, because I'm thinking perhaps that your anxiety might be balanced out by some yoga therapy. So, there's so many different ways to look at the human brain and how, mind, body, and soul is all connected. And if you nurture all of it, then you're going to be the best you can possibly be.
For years I was involved as an educator and an administrator in a Steiner school, Waldorf education. I don't know if you're
I
familiar.
had the feeling of that when I looked at your websites for the programs that you donate to.
Yeah, it blew my mind because I had such a horrible experience in my education, my own education, even though I was growing up around the world and, attending international schools, the quality of the education was very low. Very often the teachers were there to travel and have summers off, They really weren't there for the children. They weren't there to be educators. And I felt the weight of that. My education came from my time sitting in the libraries and my time studying the things I was compelled to learn about and watching the world around me. It gave me an opportunity to become an observer in the world. And in time, and I grew up around the world, I had never heard of Rudolf Steiner. I had never heard of Waldorf education. And I thought my first experience was to go in and be a drama teacher. Just for about 6 weeks to do a residency. And I walked in and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I said, this is a school, but all the children are happy and it's beautiful. And everything has to do with the next thing that they're learning. It's all integrated and holistic. And, it was just such a beautiful gesture in education that I thought, I need to know more about this. I need to know more about what's behind it, what's beneath it. The children never learn about Rudolf Steiner as a philosopher or the leader of the anthroposophical movement or any of that stuff. And anthroposophy is the underpinning of not only Waldorf education, but biodynamic farming and medical research. And there are all these layers to it that it just, it can really take you down a rabbit hole. But I think the essence of it, anthropos meaning divine, or meaning human rather, and Sophia meaning wisdom, anthroposophy, right? So it's human wisdom. And it's the human wisdom that we glean from our experiential learning around us throughout our life. And so it was born out of theosophy, theos meaning divine, and Sophia wisdom. And Steiner was really curious about where does the human being fit into this divine wisdom picture? Because that seems to be the thing that's missing. And if we consider that every human being is the center of the universe from our own perspective, right? We only know what we can see in our 360 degree, and we have more than 5 senses, right? We have a sense of humor, we have a sense of danger, we have a sense of beauty, and all those other things, those super sensible qualities. That's also very layered. Steiner was talking about that, and it was about the human's capacity to keep at bay those forces outside of ourselves that are trying to pull us out of our humanity. We have the sex, drugs, and rock and roll world. That's all very sensual and very, the idea of fame and luxury and all of that pulls at us from one end. And then you have the technology on the other hand that draws us in, right? And you think of everyone carrying around their mobile phones and you look at the scale, most of the world today is experiencing, and I'm talking about, developed world. We're looking at it from the perspective that's all in the palm of our hand, and it gives us a false sense of scale. When you consider everything that's outside of the human being, the entire known and unknown in the cosmos, we are actually quite microscopic, maybe even less than microscopic. And yet there are whole worlds on the quantum level that are much smaller than we are, but we are the pivotal place, this human capacity to wonder and to imagine those worlds within and without, and to identify those forces pulling against us and pushing at us that draw us from the core of our power and as human beings, as individuals. And the core of that is love, the core of everything. And I just found it to be not an epiphany, the work of Rudolf Steiner, but it was a validation of things that I've seen and sensed since my early childhood, and been able to sort of sit back from and say, oh, I want to know why that person's acting that way. I'm not going to be a victim. I've never felt like a victim in that sense. I'm sure as a child I must have. But when I reached that age where your curiosity sort of bleeds into your intellect, and you want to find out the workings of the human mind and the biographies of people that are the roots of their behavior in adulthood, that's where I found the magic.
Definitely. And, you know, one of the first things that I talk about with any of the people that I work with is the fact that nobody's perspective is exactly the same as everybody else's, because we all have to see the world through our own filters and layers of experience. And the most important integral thing to teach young people these days is emotional intelligence, is to be able to understand that this is what the world is making me feel, and that's okay. And to recognize that the world is making other people feel different things for their own reasons, and that's okay. And we just need to have empathy and compassion for the fact that everybody comes from their own experience, whether that be good or bad, and that's what's shaping their reality.
And that's what I mean by being the center of the universe. Everyone has their own, like a lighthouse. We are each of us a lighthouse, and our beam only goes so far before it dissipates out into the ether, right?
Yeah.
And so we can illuminate 360 degrees, but our beam only goes so far. And so to be able to understand that and understand that there are more questions than there are answers, it sort of allows one to drop their shoulders a little bit and say, I don't have to understand everything. I'm not meant to understand everything, but I will understand everything that my light touches.
Yeah. And I think that the really important message for young people, and this is what I've really been pushing with my latest book, which is the children's book, and that's why this one is so important to me, is the fact that, you know, children are told that they have to be a certain way and they have to fit in a certain way. And then the more that our culture tries to diversify the acceptable, is the more challenges children have to say, well, okay, well, this is what the world is labeling everything to be. What label do I need? What label is getting forced on me? What label do I accept? I'm told I have to accept this and I have to do this. And I'm more about children just understanding that whatever it is that makes you you, that's okay. You just be you, you know? And then if you're you and you're, as you say, you use the word authentic, I think it was before, you know, if you're authentic about who you are, then the world will accept you to be you.
On your terms, not on their terms.
And the younger that children know this, the more important it is for them, because then they don't spend all of these years trying to be something that they don't have to be.
A guy wire is a tensioned cable that is designed to enhance the stability of a freestanding structure. Think of me as your guy wire. In terms of life skills mentoring, you're perfectly capable of standing stably on your own 2 feet. But I'm a cable that can enhance your stability. I'm available for individual or couples counseling, life skills mentorship, child loss grief support, LGBTQ+ support. I can also officiate weddings, end-of-life ceremonies, baby namings, invocations, or whatever guidance you may need. I serve all genders, all ages. Sessions are affordable, discreet, private, and conducted online. Find me at guy-wire.org. Book your appointment today.
Greetings. I'm Queen Bee Divine. The cure is conversation. And where can you find me? At bluntreflections.com, where I will be talking to guests from around the world that not only share their time, but their insights and their tips on how they became the best version of who they were meant to be. So if you're looking for a great story and a great time, check me out at bluntreflections.com. The cure is conversation. And remember, blase blase means to tell your story.
And they will ask for guidance when they feel lost. They will come to you and say, Mom, Dad, teacher, I don't understand this. What do you know of this? Right?
And I think it's really important to have children who feel the safety,
That's
the
right.
security that they can ask.
That's right.
Because there are so many children who don't have that magical big person protecting them and don't feel that they have any magical big person protecting them. And I think that's a really important thing, that, you know, every child deserves the right to be important, special, safe, and loved. So, and this is the message that I keep pushing out with my resources that I'm, you know, trying to share with the world, is that every little person needs to find their magical big person. And, you know, that could be mum or dad, that could be a teacher, that could be a librarian, that could be, you know, the neighbor, that whoever it is that's going to see you for you and encourage you to be your best, you know.
And with one exception, the only place I could find that as a child was within. And that's what I mean by that inner adult, because sometimes the world of adults is not there to support you and to, you know, give you that input, that you're valuable, that you're worthy. And I do think, getting back to the question of gender, I think that the messages I've certainly seen, I've certainly been aware of my privilege as a man, especially a light-skinned man walking this world, an American light-skinned man walking this world. I think that it in my experience, what I've seen, and I know every individual is different, and there are women, girls who have risen above the limitations that the world puts on women, or has put in the past, because we can't go back and retrace our steps and fix anything that's happened up until now. We can't bring the burnt witches back. You know, we can only look to the moment that we're in and say what still needs to be elevated and what still needs to be fixed. And again,
and it's really interesting to look at the different perspectives on feminism and women and the challenges they overcome, because and this again comes back to the filters that we all have to look through. Is I saw a media person you know, commenting on the fact that these women in countries that are brutalized and tortured and murdered for not wearing a face covering, they're going through gender discrimination.
Yes.
But if somebody doesn't hold the door for you, or, you know, there's so many different ways where people feel that they're discriminated about by their gender, all very relative. And so there's always, you know, and I think that's why I've never really felt like, as you were talking about, you've never really felt like the victim. I've never felt a victim for being female, because you look at females across the globe and there are plenty of people who are suffering from their gender. And I live in Australia, and I'm a very privileged person in the grand scheme of things.
I think that's important for us to recognize and to reflect upon, is our privilege, where it lies. I think everyone can find in one way or another, whether it's in culture, and I want to get back to the word culture, or whether it's in your profession, your industry, or even within your family, there is a certain degree of privilege, depending on where you fall in the hierarchy of birth, and right. I mean, this is something that's documented and studied. And I was a middle child, and I was always in that position of being either scapegoated or ignored. I much preferred being ignored,
Yeah.
left to
Less
my own
dangerous.
devices. Huh?
Less dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. And less dangerous for me because I was safe. I was safe to go off and do my own thing without anyone. I remember being probably 11 or 12 years old in Brazil, hopping on a city bus and just going around on my own throughout the city.
Oh my
No
God.
worry about
I
it.
have an 11-year-old that I'm worried about leaving at home on her own.
Well, it's a different world today than it was in 1976 or whatever. And I also think that there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear, and for good reason. I think people, again, coming back to the lost traveler, we are all lost travelers in our way. And to strive for and seek out the common ground between us as human beings is the universal conversation. It's a universal quest for me.
Oh, certainly.
Because that gives us a sense of reflection back without a label. My only label is my name and the vibration that carries out into the world. Henry Cameron. I hyphenated my name with my son's name after he passed from brain cancer when he was 13. Because
I thought perhaps it might be something like that from the Lost Travelers Club website.
Yeah, well, the Lost Travelers Club is the foundation that supports parents of child loss, and that this podcast supports. It's a stream of income and interest and awareness building for the journey of parents of child loss, because we are invisible in the world. There's no word like widow or orphan to describe a parent who's outlived a child. And so
that's very true.
You talk about perspective. I look at it as akin to losing an eye, losing a child. Your perspective on the world is completely different than everyone else in the room. You could pop in a glass eye and you can't really tell unless you're looking very closely what that loss was, and it'll never grow back. Your sight will never come back the way it was. It's a painful wound that'll never heal. And yet it brings with it a unique perspective that is a gift for me, I feel. And not every parent feels that way. A lot of parents feel lost completely. I was traveling a few years ago around Europe. I'm based in Spain right now, but I was in the UK at the time, and I needed to get out of the country for a minute. And so I went to Belgium, and I had to switch trains in Brussels, and they put me on the wrong train, and I ended up almost to Germany on the opposite side of the country of where I was supposed to be. And I had to go back to Brussels, and I went to the ticket agent and I told her the story, and she leans back in her chair and she says, you are a lost traveler. I almost wept, because that was the closest thing that I had ever heard anyone say that describes what it feels like on the other side of child loss. You feel like you're a lost traveler until you meet other lost travelers who get it, who understand that journey, and they can walk with you on that path, and you can help each other.
Your generous sponsorship and individual support of the Lost Traveler podcast benefits the Lost Travelers Club, a charitable project under the fiscal sponsorship of United Charitable, a nonprofit 501c3 organization. The Lost Travelers Club focuses primarily on the needs of parents who have outlived their beloved children. We recently launched our new Brain Candy Project wing, providing art supplies to children still struggling with critical or terminal health-related conditions. We hope to raise enough funds to launch Brain Candy, an arts and literature magazine created by and for these young people. Find out more at www.braincandy.online. Thank you.
It's a very powerful thing, and I think we
You know,
all
I
have that.
always
We all
think
have that.
that we meet someone for a really important reason.
Mhm.
And I've just realized the really important reason I've met Henry Cameron.
Really?
Because I have a friend and she lost her son. It's a strange thing. I taught Avalon from year 7. I remember him coming in as a little year 7 boy, such a beautiful kid that was so academic. He just loved being at school. And I taught him all the way through to year 12 and wished him well off down to uni. And it was some years later that he died in a car accident on his way home to see his mum. And his mum has never got over it. You can feel her pain. It's palpable every time.
Yes.
Every time you see her, if you see her posts on social media, she's just, and it just makes me think of her when you're talking about this, because she's just, yeah, she never gotten over it. And it's like what you're saying with a lost traveler. She's just,
You're wandering. You're wandering
sounds
behind.
like her.
Yeah, and I think it's important. That's why I wanted to reach out to other parents, and I'm happy to talk to her anytime. Yeah, I'd like to create with the Lost Travelers Club an actual travel group that we can journey together, go on holidays, beautiful places of staggering magnificence. I for the 10-year milestone of Cameron's passing, I took a road trip around Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, around the south coast and up to Galway and then across to Dublin. And it was really an amazing journey that I did just alone with my assistant's dog. And yet I didn't feel alone. And there are the places that the Irish call the thin places, which are places of majestic beauty that you feel that the veil between worlds is thinner in a way. And I, around every corner, I found them. And I could feel him with me. I still do. And I don't believe in death anymore. This is a really profound, talk about pivot. I believe that death is an illusion. If we can validate through science, through physics, that everything is energy, right? My teacup, my dog, my light, my curtains on my window, the sun, my brother, all of these things, we are all energy. And we know that energy cannot be created. It cannot be destroyed. It just transmutes, it changes form. So I believe that it is one of our human capabilities to sense how energy, interpreted as frequency, meets us. We can become sensitive to the energies and frequencies around us. And for me, that is how I stay connected to Cameron. By adding his name, hyphenating his name with mine, the way that people link their last names when they marry sometimes. It presents my name, my frequency to the world, always connected and informed.
As part of him.
As him part of me and me part of him, people get to know him through me. It also keeps his name in the world. When you've lost a child, nobody speaks their name anymore, not even family members. They're dealing with their own grief, but they also don't want to upset you. And I have yet to find a parent of child loss who both dreads hearing their child's name and longs to hear their child's name. And so I claim it. I claim that. And it's also a mathematical equation. It's Henry minus Cameron. That is my identity. That's who I am walking in the world. And so it's
so beautiful.
You
the
know,
way it's got so many layers.
It's got a lot of layers to it. And I'd much rather tell that story than to talk about, oh yes, he was 11 and he got brain cancer and all that journey, that whole story. That's not fun to talk about, but there's something profound in, you know, as I say, my name is my label, and the impact that my name has on other people through the story that it tells.
And I think that really does resonate with what you were saying about your club or your group, with that only somebody who's lost a child can understand the feeling. Because just listening to you then about the different, the different layers of the name and what it means, that's something that I would imagine that Charlie feels exactly the same, but I would never have thought of it because I'm not in that space.
I would have never have thought of it. I went on a road trip because I had to get out of town. When you've lost your child, you can't go to the market without somebody falling apart in your arms. You're trying to get through your own mourning and your own shock and your own grief, especially if I had the luxury of 2 years to process his passing with him. And he was aware the whole time of the journey and what was going on. But I've met many families like Charlie, who they had a healthy, vibrant child there one day, gone the next.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that journey. And they can't imagine watching me watch my child die for 2 years helplessly. I mean, there's that, it's like birth. Death has its own sort of unique quality in each experience. And I went on this road trip to the Grand Canyon in the Western United States, which is unconscionably big. I mean, pictures don't do it justice. And I needed to feel small again after 2 years of trying to be a superhero and save myself.
Yeah.
And
that's a lovely way to put it.
I needed my scale back, and way out in the middle of the desert on your way to the canyon, there are long, long stretches, kilometers and kilometers of nothing but desert. And at night, just starry sky and inky black and the lights of your car on the road. That's all you see. And I found this little alcove in the middle of nowhere, 3 buildings with a 100-meter tall lamppost. And in the beam, there were these 3 buildings, a small motel, a Native American or indigenous trading post, and a post office. No civilization for miles and miles around, yet it had its own zip code. And I looked up the post office, and it was called Cameron, Arizona.
Oh my God.
What are the odds I would end up there?
But that's the thing.
I stayed in them.
People come to places or they meet people that is just, it's part of their journey.
It's the frequency that you're picking up on and you're following.
Definitely.
You're trusting, and you hone and develop the skills to be able to do that. And I woke up, I stayed in the motel, and there was a woman sitting on her blanket selling the jewelry that she had made. And she was a classic sage, indigenous North American woman. She had long silver hair and tiny slit eyes and wrinkled skin from the elements. And I could tell she carried a lot of wisdom. And I asked her if I could sit with her. And she invited me to sit down. And I said, I've traveled the world. I speak multiple languages. I've looked and researched and Googled up the wazoo looking for a word to identify, label who I am now. After child loss, I just lost my son a few months ago. And she said, well, perhaps it's too profound a loss for a mere word to describe. People expect that they may lose their partner or their parents someday, but you don't expect to outlive your child. And I asked her, is there anything in your culture that holds this? Is there a word or an expression? And she said, no, your name would change. When you lose a child, your name changes because your name is the expression of your core identity. That's how people get to know you, is through your name. If you do good deeds and you speak good words and people smile when they hear your name, right? Yeah. And so I might call you Henry, whose son is gone. That becomes your name. And everyone who you meet you're introduced as Henry, whose son is gone. Or if they think about you and you're not there, or if they talk about you with other people, even in their dreams, they identify you that way, so that everyone who's aware of you holds you in your loss. I thought, see, and I didn't have that. I didn't have the awareness that any culture did that. I thought, what a beautiful way to hold this. But I'm not going to go around the world calling myself Henry, whose son is gone. Nice to meet you. That's not who but I needed to find the right way. And Henry Cameron
or
does
Henry
that.
hyphen or Henry minus Cameron. It's just
It does
so
that.
incredible the way it can and go like hit those two different marks.
And I think everyone has the power to do that for themselves. You're given your name just as you're given your gender when you're born. The whole world tells you who you are. But I think permission is a powerful thing. I know permission is a powerful thing. And if we empower one another to claim our name, to claim our label for ourselves, I think we are in an amazing time. There's more freedom to be an individual now than I think there ever has been in history. Other people have claimed it. Some people have died for it. But I think now, and I hope in the East and in the Middle East and other countries, it becomes easier even still. And we're seeing change happen as we speak. To be,
it's interesting to think of the way that you know, you've got the lost traveler bit,
yeah,
and then the freedom to be an individual, the freedom to be whoever you so desire to be. And when you put that together with you put it together, oh, where was I going with that? You're talking so I was thinking, I'm like, oh, that's a point, and that's a point, and that's a point, and then I need to put the points back together again to count it together. But yeah, the freedom to be whoever you want to be, with the fact not lost it. Don't know.
Well, to be who you are, whether you want to be, you get to choose. Truly, you are empowered to choose who you express. The way you put yourself out to the world is the way the world perceives you. That's how much power you have. Right? And the whole world can point at you and say, you're this, that, and the other thing. And this is what I experienced as a kid, was everyone pointing their fingers at me saying, you're this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, why don't you ask me who I am? Why are you assuming?
And that's what I was thinking too, about the fact that the lost traveler, people are lost when they don't know their purpose, or they don't feel they have a purpose, or they don't feel that life has a purpose.
That's right.
And they're searching for their tribe, and they're searching for their identity. And I think, and definitely, you know, in the different parts that you study in a psychology degree,
right,
you study how we go through these phases where we are searching for identity, we are searching for the labels that fit, that kind of thing. But when it all comes back to it, I think everyone's purpose is very unique too.
That's right.
And as soon as you find that, you can cast off all of the other labels because they don't matter anymore. And it doesn't matter that somebody's trying to pin those labels on you. They just fall away because, like, no, this is where I'm going. This is my purpose, and this is, you know, no one can stop me from getting to there because I've now found out that that's the goal. And many people who feel that they're lost don't have the goal in mind. They don't know what their purpose is.
Yeah, for years, I felt like I was walking into a rotunda surrounded by open doors. I have a lot of talents, a lot of interests, a lot of abilities, and I'd pick an open door, I'd walk through it, and I'd be another rotunda surrounded by open doors. Okay, well, I guess I'm not in the right place. I'm going to go down this road. You know, I'm going to take this door. I'd walk into another one, and a great teacher one time told me, it was a great metaphor for that journey of feeling lost. And she said, this teacher said to me, why don't you just hang out there for a minute? Is there a bench? No, sit on the floor. Check out the architecture of the rotunda. Is there anything painted on the ceiling? And I think she meant be where you are. Just be where you are. The joy, the wonder, the magic is in being in the moment, understanding you can't go back and change or fix anything. There's no time machine invented that can take us back to change where we've come from. And there's no time machine either to project us forward into tomorrow. This moment is it. This is what we have. And our whole biographies, yours and mine, have led us to this conversation. And not only our biographies, but the biography of everyone who's in our DNA. Back to the first human being.
Which leads you back to that thing of, you know, when we're looking at purpose, the purpose of life is to find joy. And if we find joy, we're doing what we're passionate about. So I think if you just follow your joy, just search for your joy all the time in the present moment. What am I thankful for? What am I joyful for in this moment? And if you just keep going from moment to joy, then you're going to be filling your cup with all the things that you need.
That's a tough one for parents of child loss, because for many of us, I would venture to say most of us, our joy or our sense of joy was wrapped up in parenting and in our children. And so what it's felt like to me is that my joy left with Cameron. He's still here in his way, but I don't think I feel joy the way I used to. I don't interpret it the way other people do. But what I have found in my purpose, in being of service through my grief, has brought me a tremendous amount of satisfaction in my living. And that's enough for me.
Have you read the Bhagavad Gita?
Yes.
Yeah. What did you think of the interpretation of death in that? Well, the interpretation of eternal life, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to what I'm talking about. I don't believe in death. There is.
I thought of that when you first said it. I thought of the text.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, I haven't read it for decades. I was young. I was a teenager when I read it.
You should read it again.
I
definitely thought of my friend who had lost a child when I was reading it, because I've only just recently read it again for my yoga stuff.
Yeah.
I thought, I need to tell her about this. She needs to read this book. It just came to me like a certain part. I can't even remember what part I was reading. I'm like, she needs to read this book. And it was about the fact that there is no death.
I'll put a link in the description. I'll put a link into the description for readers to any other resources that you think will be helpful.
I think it's quite a way through. It's maybe towards the end of the text.
Yes.
It's certainly not in the first book, but it's quite a way through where he's talking about the fact that the concept of death, the same way you're talking about it, that it's just a reimagining of the energy that's evolved, and it's all just energy. And so, you could be Cameron still there with you in the same way that, loss is just the veil between worlds.
Well, and that's it. I think that, again, we can be inspired by literature. We can be inspired by philosophy. We can find our way. That's what I was getting to, is that the joy in the traveling is not in the destination, it's in the journey. And there's something about being lost that opens you up, cracks you open to new experiences, new unexpected places that you've not been before. There are so many gifts in the loss. And if you think of the loss of something, I heard recently somebody saying that a death on this side is a birth on the other, and is celebrated like a birth on the other. That it's just a constant cycle of beginnings and endings, but it's perpetual, it's eternal, as you say. Then that can sort of expand our minds. A lot of parents sit and wonder, why did this happen? Why me? And I've come to the answer, which is a hard one: why not? No one's promised a tomorrow. And it's the worst nightmare that a parent could imagine. In fact, I knew when I was 8 years old, we had a homework assignment, and we had to write a short paragraph on what is your greatest fear. And I sat there, I remember sitting there looking at this blank sheet of paper thinking, why would anyone ask a child to focus on their fear and what they're afraid of? And I wasn't a fearful child. I wasn't afraid of the dark. I wasn't afraid of bugs or snakes or spiders, anything. And the only thing I could think of at 8 years old was outliving my children. Call it a premonition. But that's what I carried until I got to the other side of it. and the worlds that have opened up because I met my fear and I survived my fear. And I don't feel the loss of him. Physically, yes, of course. And would I rather have him here? Would I rather not have had him suffer what he went through? Of course. But the fact is, here we are. As they say, it's the club no one should belong to and no one wants to belong to. Well, guess what? We're here. And there is a club, the Lost Travelers Club. Join the club. Let's talk about it. Let's be there for each other, and let's link arms and walk powerfully back into the world with the perspective that no one else could have but us.
Balance, pain mitigation, range of motion, athletic performance, focus, memory, immune system support, and REM level of sleep. All this and more made possible affordably with no pharmaceuticals, no injections, or invasive treatments. Just socks, insoles, and patches made stronger with the tactile patterning of Vox Life products. Scientifically proven to work and guaranteed. Now in the USA, Canada, and the UK. Visit www.dianedinkmeyer.voxlife.com. That's Vox, VOXX, Life. You'll be glad you did.
Right.
And it's interesting the way that, as you say, that you're all part of the club because some part of your perspective is linked. And that's why we're all very different. We all have our own filters, our own experiences, but there's that link that links you together in the same way that, you know, when I think about the holistic way that I work with people, I've read the, the Bhagavad Gita, I've read the Silver Mind Control, I've read the, what's that lady, The Secret. I've read like so many different texts that are about different things. But when you pull the threads together, they're all talking about the same thing.
That's
and
right.
Nowadays, like when I get anything like from uni with psychology or from yoga texts that I'm reading, or when I find that thread that pulls them together, I'm like, aha, here's another one.
Yes.
And because there's much that the interpretations and perspectives of different people are heralded as different until you start to really look at them. But they're so similar.
So I can't believe we've been talking for an hour. This happens. Time and space just disappears, and then all of a sudden, boop! Here we are. I like to wrap up with asking for 3 of those threads to share with our listeners around the world. Universal threads that we can all reflect on and maybe try out with the tools that we already have to elevate our proficiency in one skill or another.
So what is it that
So 3
you're
tools,
asking?
3, like we're talking about these threads that these common threads that we can look at and find, discover. What are 3 that you've discovered that maybe somebody hasn't yet that you can share?
As in text or things that I do? Or...
Yeah, like in your personal toolkit that you have synthesized with the tools that you already carry that somebody else might be able to play with.
Well, if we sort of pick different tools from different places, I'd say that the Bhagavad Gita is a must read for everybody. I think that is the most incredible text. And if you can get past the fact that it's based on the interpretation of very old scriptures, it has some really universal themes that you see coming out in so many modern texts.
Right.
Very much like Rhonda Byrne's The Secret, that kind of thing. But I'd say that definitely thinking about, the things that I do every day that help me is I love affirmations. I love remembering to remember. you know, when everything gets overwhelming, when the world gets busy, when everything's hectic, and I'm just, you've just got to slow down, calm your mind down, and thinking, why am I here? Why am I doing this? You know, what purpose is this serving? And is this filling my cup? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? So I write my gratitudes in my journal each day. And sometimes, you know, I like to ask the universe to remind me a lot. Like, so for example, I was swimming this afternoon, and my swim time is my time out. It's my moving meditation where I can just calm down because there's nothing else I can do. I'm just swimming. Mm-hmm. And so every now and then I'll ask, you know, to remind me to remember. And I'm swimming along, and there's the dark clouds and everything when I got into the pool, and then the sun breaks out and starts putting the ripples on the bottom of the pool that I just love to watch. Yeah. And I'm like, there's my little reminder, you know. So I think that definitely how you're talking about that, it's all just energy. We're all just energy. And if we get on the right frequency, then we're going to be moving to our best selves, to where we want to be. And you don't have to do it alone. You know, if you need a reminder, just ask for a reminder. Right. You know, just put it out there. I want to remember why I'm here. I want to remember why I'm doing this. And it'll come to you. Like, it just comes. It's energy.
It is. It's like a great cosmic radio, right? You're the one who has to plug it in. You have to plug in the radio to get the juice.
And tune in the frequency.
And turn on the machine, and then tune in the frequency. And you know what? You're the one in control of that dial. If the frequency isn't right, keep going, keep turning it until you find the right frequency. It's that simple. I think people work too hard at it, don't they? In most cases.
Definitely. Yeah. I don't know if I've given 3. That's the reading, the affirmations, the gratitudes, I've given more than 3, haven't I?
Yeah, hey, it doesn't matter. It's all good. It's all great. Well, listen, this was a really lovely hour. I feel like I've made a new friend, Kylie, and I hope that we didn't even touch on the other work that you do as a writer and an app creator and all these other amazing. Will you come back for a part 2 sometime?
Oh, I'd love to. I'd love to. Thank you very much for having me on the show. But I'm truly thinking this whole thing, we were brought together for Charlie. I need to get in touch with Charlie.
Well, and
tell her about your Lost Travelers Club.
I'm very happy to talk with her, and any listeners out there, if you just go to losttravelers.club, you'll find out what it's about, and we will create what it's about. It's always in a state of movement, a state of flux, depending on the constellation of people who wander in and wander out on their journey. It's always the right time to come together and find that common ground, because it is there. We just have to, as Kylie was saying, we just have to ask. And there it is. Thanks again so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to Season 3 of the Lost Traveler Podcast with your host, Henry Cameron Allen. Visit me online at www.henryallen.org. Thank you to all my guests, and thank you to my listeners all around the world. I couldn't do this without your support. Let's keep striving for a better world together.